This is Joanna Lilly. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Since its inception in 1949, Mental Health Awareness Month has been a cornerstone in addressing the challenges faced by millions of Americans living with mental health conditions. Although this month of recognition has been in existence for a while, stigmatization around mental health still exists. Throughout the month of May, we are bringing you episodes from the parent perspective to highlight this special month. Welcome to the Parent Series, brought to you by Success is Subjective.
It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilly.
Allison is a New York City parent who never imagined life without her school-age children at home. She became a teacher partly to be on the same schedule as her children. So imagine what it felt like that early morning in May when transport picked up her 12-year-old son to go to a therapeutic wilderness program. For the next 14 months, Allison's son went from wilderness to a therapeutic boarding school and then back to wilderness by choice before returning home at 14. During that time, Allison committed to doing the work, which meant increasing her capacity and competency so she could rediscover her parental purpose and bring significance and belonging back to her home. Today, not only is Allison still a teacher on a school schedule that aligns with her children, but she's also a parent coach who works with families with struggling tweens and teens. Listen to this podcast and learn more about Allison's journey from feeling shame and guilt to strength and gratitude. All right, Allison, thanks for being a guest on the Parent Series of the Success is Subjective podcast. If you're okay with it, let's just jump right in. And why don't you give a little backstory on what was going on with your child prior to entering treatment?
So I say that COVID was actually the gift in the sense for me that it was a lockdown and we were on Zoom. And I think that was the point at which I realized that I did not have the capacity to parent him in the way that he needed, and to give him what he needed. And so working with his team and involving then an educational consultant, we made the decision that it was time for him to go to wilderness.
Okay. So what was, and before we even jump into kind of talking a little bit about that wilderness experience for your son and you, why don't you tell a little bit of backstory of just kind of like, how are you feeling in this right before, right? When we kind of come to this crossroads of making that decision, like you said, like, hey, the team kind of rallied and said, this is the path that we need to like go on. But coming on the heels too of you making that comment of like, hey, COVID was actually a little bit of a blessing because it brought us to realize that this wasn't working. So what were you feeling as a parent?
Right. So something that I'd written down and thinking about this was, that I share with people is that, as a parent, I know what it means to lose my parental identity and to feel trapped and on that emotional roller coaster. And I was going through that cycle where just that constant uncertainty leading to resistance and the unknown to worry and that apprehension to self-doubt. And I think that self-doubt perpetuated my inability to make a decision and just saying stuck in what was, and fearing what could happen next. And so it was that like experience of like the past experiences freeze us, right? And future tripping impedes us. And, my son was always struggling, whether it wasn't a question of if, it was always when. So whether he was at school or at sleepaway camp or wherever he was, I always knew that call was going to come. When he was 2 years old, it looked at, he had no body and space awareness. He had no safety awareness. Instead of sitting next to someone, he would sit on top of them. If in his mind he'd be at the top of a slide and in his mind he already wanted to be 10 blocks away, he would just jump down from the top to the ground. So, he was a bit of a challenge even then, right? So at the age of 4, it was, wow, you should consider meds. We do not diagnose ADHD at this age, but he has so much going for him and there's so much that's out of his control. I said no until it impacts him socially and emotionally and, academically. I'm not doing that. And so from there, it just continued. We saw the different patterns of what was in his control and what was out of his control. I think that what I started to see was as he got older, he started to internalize it more. So when I started to see his self-concept, right, just go down the pike, where it was, he became aware, right? He had no problems making friends. He couldn't sustain any friendships. And I think that going back to that moment in the lockdown, when he was on Zoom, he had been off his ADHD meds for a while. And his impulsivity was through the roof. And he was on mood stabilizers and antidepressants. And whether it was attention seeking or not, he was definitely depressed. He was definitely full of anxiety, and the stakes kept getting higher. So we'd go for bike rides and he'd ride in the middle of the street. And I'd say, go to the side. And he was like, don't you know, I want to get hit. And so again, whether that was attention seeking or not, the fact that what I was seeing was you're on all of these meds and you're definitely depressed, you're raising the stakes, and your impulsivity is through the roof. And put that combination together, I was scared. I was never fearful of my son hurting someone else. He's not a physical kid, but I was scared of him hurting himself. And so when it got to that point, he hadn't hit puberty yet. And I felt like, what's going to happen when he hits puberty? There was that addiction to, right, as typical with kids who struggle with ADHD and mood dysregulation, of thinking like, oh yeah, all these friends online, right? Minecraft, these are my friends. And they're like, no, these are strangers. These are not your friends. And so the life that he was entering into, or had entered into by that point online, was also extremely worrisome. So it was time for me to let go of the shame and the guilt and sort of take charge and say, this is what needs to be done. And so once the decision was made, that was the hardest part, right? You make the decision and then boom, it happens as quickly as it can happen.
Yeah. Hearing all of that, right? That backstory and kind of painting the picture of like how your son was showing up and then obviously coming to that place of making that decision. What was that wilderness experience like for him? And how was it like for you as a parent? Because those are two very different perspectives in terms of the experience. So I'm just kind of curious what you think.
Yeah. So for me, I think that once the decision was made, then it was transport. And I think that was devastating. Again, it was during COVID. It was the lockdown. We were actually in Florida. We're from New York, and we got sort of stuck in Florida and sent him to Idaho. And so that was devastating. Once he left, I think that's when just the emotions came out, and I was able to just sort of, it's that fight or flight. I think I was able to release, like, just cry and cry and cry and cry. And then say, okay, like, he's going on this journey and I'm going to embark on this journey with him, and I'm going to be all in. And so for me, things like the parallel process, reading that book, The Journey of the Heroic Parent was something that was really helpful for me in understanding myself and taking my time and understanding the importance of self-care and what that meant. And physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, professionally, like every single aspect of self-care was something that I needed to do. I needed to understand and rebuild my capacity because I had lost significance and belonging as a parent. Like, my parental purpose was gone, that identity was gone, and I needed to get it back. So I got educated and I did the work, and I said, what are the things that I need to work on? I need to work on responding and not reacting, right? And sort of setting goals for myself and diving in with the people around me, my daughter, my partner, my parents, because I was, my family, my friends, So yeah, while he was there, and then I think the weekly calls, I mean, we got really lucky. I mean, his therapist from Wilderness, we still have a relationship with him. Like, he was just such a godsend and such a gift. And the way that we structured the calls, right, with starting with sort of strengths and positives, and then talking and moving into challenges, just how all of that was structured, practicing the tools of active listening and leading with curiosity, that support was amazing for me. And then going to Spark, going to visit him and engage and live that experience with him for a few days was really important. And it changed our whole relationship, right? It brought us back. So I think that for both of us, because I think, again, feeling that, significance, which I think of as like that purpose and contribution, and then that belonging of like reconnecting as a family, and that's our community, with that community at Spark I'm very grateful.
So, Allison, you did just you hinted at some of the things that you were talking about, like books you read, attending the parent workshop, like really leaning in to kind of focusing on whatever was recommended, right? It's not just your son's journey, but it's your journey. So I'm just going to ask you this question, was there anything else that you leaned on for support or kind of tapped into for you as a parent during this journey?
Yes. So I have been an educator for over 25 years. And so as an educator, as a teacher, right, there are tools that I have in my tool belt, especially in the school setting that I'm in. And I decided that I wanted to become a parent coach. For me, while my son was away, I know that I would have benefited from having a journey partner. It wasn't so much therapy that I needed at that time. It was someone to help hold me accountable, to say, okay, I want to work on responding and not reacting. And what does that look like? And have those check-ins to come up with what I want to work on, and then make sure that I follow through, because we know that it takes at least 30 days to build a habit, right? And then you have to keep the practice. And for me, that's challenging. So I made a choice to become a parent coach, so that, and specifically working with families with children, either in therapeutic settings, or they're at that point where they're thinking about it, or they're coming out. And having gone through that 1.5 years of training to become a coach, alongside teaching, alongside parenting, that's what helps me to still be the best parent that I can be, because I am human. And so I actually find that when I'm around the tools, I practice them, and I always learn from the parents that I coach. And, that's a great blessing. So for me, being that vessel and being able to learn and grow and share the tools that I have and that I've gained, and the knowledge, continues to help me.
We'll make sure that we have the link to your website. So for any parent that's listening to this, like you said, that's in it or about to be in it, because they're kind of towing that line of, we're worried about where this is headed for our adolescent or young adult. It sounds like it's a great resource. And like you said, you didn't need therapy. And I think that's what a lot of times parents think when we say, like, hey, you might need some support. Yeah, certainly some parents could benefit from therapy if they're not seeing a therapist. But I think the way that you described how a parent coach shows up as that person, the guide, you're holding them accountable. It's so beneficial. And it really allows the parents to have their own kind of transformative experience. I think the other thing that I see as a consultant is that a coach can work with you like they're the thread throughout the treatment journey, right? Because their like actual program experiences are short-lived in the grand scheme of things. So to have a coach kind of throughout could be a longer term support that parents could really benefit from. And it's not program specific.
Yeah, I think that's important, right? Because as I shared earlier, when you have a struggling child, it's not if, right? It's when.
Yeah.
And when, that struggling child shows up, when my struggling child, right? When he's struggling, it's all about my connection and not correction, and using the tools coming from a place of curiosity. And it is not easy. So yeah, I thank you. And I'm I'm happy that I understand what it means to coach because I never tell anyone what to do. Again, it's their goals. And you're right. There are times where they might bring something up and I'm like, I'm not a therapist, I'm a coach. And if this is something you feel like you need, then how can I help you to take that next step to reach out to that person? Right.
Yeah.
And then following up, always with summaries, because I always share summaries so that the end, that was the other thing I think that, having summaries at the end of the time that I work with the families that I coach, they can always look back on it and say, oh, yes, I need to protect my peace. I need to, go back to this type of self-care because getting a massage, a manicure, going out for drinks is not it. Right. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. So going back to your son, what was his journey like after Wilderness?
Okay, so we did make the decision to have him continue on at a therapeutic boarding school. We felt that not only did he need more time after 13 weeks to really build the tools into sort of his life, but we needed more time. His father and I have been divorced since he's 4 years old. And there was still work that we needed to do on ourselves. And the concern was that if he were to come back home, the old patterns just would have come up really fast. And so he went to a therapeutic boarding school. And after several months there, he started to say that he felt like it wasn't helping him in the same way that Wilderness did. And he learned to advocate for himself. And we told him, you have to complete what's expected of you at the therapeutic boarding school. We spoke with his therapist from Wilderness. He said, Mom, I would rather go back to Wilderness. It was more helpful for me. This is a kid who's a city kid. This is a kid, if you had said, what's your worst nightmare? It would have been being in the wilderness, staying alone. He's used to living in buildings surrounded by people. It literally was like take every irrational fear that he had ever had and everything that he would not be interested in. That was it. So for him to say he'd rather go back to Wilderness, we listened. And so we spoke with his therapist and he said from Wilderness, and he said, you know what, bring him back. If he wants to come back before he transitions home for high school, we will know very quickly if he really has made the progress that he has needed to make to come home or not. Best case scenario, he comes here and he could be a mentor for the few weeks that he's here. And best case scenario, he still needs more time and, he'll have that before he comes home. So he went back. He went back to Wilderness by choice for a month. I got to go to Spark again, which was amazing, and spend another 5 days in that space with him. And again, I think to this day, he went when he was 12. He turned 13 there. He's now turning 17 in 2 weeks. And I really, again, believe that the relationship that we have and how we know how to communicate with each other is because of the journey that we went on and understanding that the journey continues. Right? So.
Yeah. I mean, to hear him advocate for himself saying, I learned more there, or I'm doing better there. And like you said, for a young man from the city, I think that speaks volumes. And then to have kind of that, kind of reset or Wilderness 2.0 experience really kind of set him on the trajectory to have this communication pattern that you all have as a family, right? Just so much growth. That's what I'm hearing. Just so much growth.
Right. And I do want to say one more thing because we did send him at 12 and that was hard. It was a conscious choice also knowing he hadn't hit puberty yet. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't smoking. He wasn't doing drugs. That hadn't started yet. And I will say he's, about to finish his junior year in high school and he is so responsible. And he says because he knows what it looks like when people fall into those patterns and make those choices. And so I am so proud of him today because he is a city kid. He is around it and he doesn't engage because he knows that would not be good for him, physically, emotionally, and he wants to be home.
Well, like you said a second ago, this almost sounds like the expression best case scenario, right? Like where the decision points have been made, you keep asking or thinking through what is the best case scenario. And as you've described your son right now, it sounds like the journey that he's been on has put him in a place at almost age 17 where this is the best case scenario.
Yes. And I think it's also because I stay educated, right? And again, the coaching sort of, for me, that's my accountability, right? I don't have the coach. I finished the certification process. And by coaching, I'm constantly learning and growing and practicing so that I don't step into the emotional roller coaster, so that I know, if there's drama happening, not to, where I am in that triangle, not falling into rescuer, right? Because that is also, right, that's my go-to. So yeah. So I do want to say it's the combination of, I think, the right program for him with the right therapist at the right time in his life. And
it's still work. It's still work. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yes. And for me as a parent, also saying, okay, like what's normal teenage stuff? Because I got 2 teenagers now. My daughter's 14. So what's like normal teenage behavior? And that I have to say, breathe and say, okay, this is age appropriate and developmentally appropriate. And it's kind of amazing. And I know if and when, it'll be when, it happens again, I'll be there. I just show up as best as I can. I make mistakes, and so does he. And we grow, right? No shame.
No shame. Well, Allison, thanks again for being a guest on the podcast. Thanks for sharing your parent perspective. And we'll make sure that we have the link to your website in the show notes. So for any parent that's looking for a parent coach, wants to connect with you, they can. But thank you again for taking the time to share your story.
Thank you. Take care.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guest for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. Put a face with a voice by accessing their interview on the newly formed successissubjective.org website. If you are interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email Joanna at joanna@successissubjective.org. Be sure to check out the collegealternative.org and lilyconsulting.com websites for additional resources outside of podcasting. If you are listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe to the show. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Last but not least, Success is Subjective is listener-supported, made possible by our team and by you. You can support this podcast by joining the Patreon community at patreon.com/successissubjective. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.
Do you have a teenager or young adult who seems to have lost their way? Maybe they need help navigating adolescence, adulthood, and decisions surrounding higher education. Or maybe they have become withdrawn, their grades are slipping, or they are flat out living a reckless lifestyle, and you're concerned about their health and well-being. If this describes what your teen or young adult is facing, a therapeutic consultant may be able to help. Mental health, addiction recovery, and higher education can all be equally expensive. While information is everywhere, how do you know what option is the best one for your family? Some parents have the time to research and navigate this on their own. Some don't. If the latter applies to you, enter therapeutic consultants. Therapeutic consultants, like Joanna, listen to your family's specific needs and advocate on behalf of your loved one. TCs will research therapeutic resources, recommend treatment programs, and assist during adulthood transitions. Not being affiliated with any program, their support is completely objective and catered toward the best interest of each unique family. To find a qualified therapeutic consultant to work with, check out TCA, also known as the Therapeutic Consulting Association. Their website is therapeuticconsulting.org, all one word. Again, that's therapeuticconsulting.org. Then click the Find a Pro tab up at the top.